The next chapter of Boruto will most likely start with a flashback. This has been a common trend we have seen whenever a character gets some sort of a power-up. We saw this with Sarada when she awakened her Mangekyou Sharingan, and in the next chapter, we got a bit of a flashback of Sarada's whole perspective. And I believe that we're going to be getting one of Boruto and Momoshiki, where in this flashback, we will most likely see a conversation between Boruto and Momoshiki discussing his deal. In my opinion, it will dive deep in exactly what Momoshiki said concerning Boruto's deal. We will end up learning every aspect of that deal concerning if Momoshiki accepted. Were there any additional conditions that Momoshiki set into play? And an idea that a lot of people have been talking about, a binding vow type of situation. A contract between Boruto and Momoshiki that at least guarantees that Boruto will actually give up his body, and a few caveats that Momoshiki cannot go against. And this is where I truly believe that we will learn the price of Boruto using the karma. As one thing that has been made very clear, especially with the side text announcing Boruto awakening the karma, is that this karma will require a sacrifice from Boruto. Boruto using the karma right now is at the cost of his identity, everything that makes Boruto him. And this was clearly noted by the end text of the chapter where Boruto finally used his karma. Obviously, we know that Boruto has deemed it to be necessary due to the simple fact that he has to defeat the Senju. It seems like Boruto wants this done as fast as possible. And who really blames Boruto? We learn that Himawari is on the verge of being killed in this one chapter, so Boruto dealing with Momoshiki as fast as possible is key. And that's why he truly ended up using the karma, as although it is part of his plan to defeat Jura, it is still something that he has to do. So this chapter, starting off with this conversation between him and Momoshiki, is really what is going to be key in understanding the dynamics between Boruto and Momoshiki, especially in concern with the karma. And with the fact that everything is pointing towards Boruto having to sacrifice something, and that thing being his identity, we're truly going to learn about why Boruto ended up feeling like he was dying. I've said this multiple times in the past, but Boruto's situation with the karma doesn't have much to deal with Momoshiki. We see that Momoshiki is simply taking this bystander role, where he is looking at the various things that are taking place, obviously, and hoping that Boruto will simply die, so that he can be freed of this curse of living eternally in Boruto and seeing what is taking place. He simply wants to die. So it clearly indicates to us that this feeling of Boruto dying has nothing to do with Momoshiki, as Momoshiki hasn't really been doing anything. As Boruto quoted himself, Momoshiki has been quite silent. So if this doesn't have to deal with Momoshiki, I believe that Boruto's problem with the karma is the simple fact of what we saw in the past, Boruto and Momoshiki merging. So Boruto using the karma and making this deal with Momoshiki has little to do with fixing the karma problem, but getting Momoshiki and his superior knowledge that he possesses to be a useful factor when he eventually ends up fighting versus Jura. So Boruto will continue to use the karma when it comes to characters like Momoshiki, but in this grand battle when he has to fight versus Jura, he will lean onto the strength of Momoshiki, where Momoshiki will actually aid in this battle taking place. So what I believe we're going to start seeing is this fact of Boruto's loss of identity being showcased in the next few chapters as Boruto is using the karma. This can take place in multiple different aspects, where either we start to see Boruto show signs of changing, signs of Boruto not being himself, or either this is Boruto acting in a way that is more Otsutsuki-like, he is more bloodthirsty, his quotes that he ends up using may start mimicking those of Momoshiki, or just be more Otsutsuki-like. I expect him to continue with the fact of other people apart from him, or who do not have the same lineage, to be referred to as inferior creatures. This is definitely an aspect that we can take, where it will be a lot harder for Boruto to remain himself when he is using the karma. But another aspect that we can see take place is there being some time constraints where Boruto is capable of using the karma for a certain period of time before that merger really takes form. And this will mean that Momoshiki, in their conversation in that flashback where Momoshiki takes on that deal, Momoshiki will reveal the truth of what is taking place, and that is the simple fact that they are actually merging. So it will be introduced then as a hypothetical that Boruto can only use the karma for an extended period of time before the merger truly ends up taking place, and we see Boruto truly lose his identity. So Boruto will have a time constraint where he will remain him, and the further along he gets to that, the more and more he ends up losing his identity. I believe that Boruto using the karma now, he will not reach that point. He will not extend past that time constraint. But when he fights a character like Jura, where he has to be using the karma 24/7, it is where I believe it is quite likely that we see Boruto pass through that time constraint and end up losing his identity and everything about him when he ends up fighting Jura, giving and sacrificing everything. As this has been a key concept in Boruto, where Boruto oftentimes ends up sacrificing himself to save everybody. Boruto consistently always picks his friends, everybody around him, over himself, a big idea in him sacrificing himself when he fought versus Kawaki. But this means that Boruto's plan actually lies with him dying, as the plan that I believe that Boruto has at the current moment when it comes to the Senju and what he would do against Jura is quite simple. He has made this deal with Momoshiki so that he can use the karma and eventually get Momoshiki's aid to fight versus Jura. But when all the Senju end up being defeated, just like what he said to Momoshiki, he will let Momoshiki have full access to his body. In my personal opinion, there could be, if there is this binding vow or this contract between Momoshiki and Boruto, that Momoshiki will not be allowed to plant a divine tree in this planet, where Momoshiki will either have to leave. But if there isn't really this contract, the next thing that will take place is Kawaki taking over, and Kawaki being the person tasked with defeating Boruto, as this is the only other option to really stop Momoshiki from planting a divine tree on this planet and having it die. As what's the point of defeating Jura if you're ultimately going to let Momoshiki take over and plant a divine tree himself? It would be Boruto simply giving Momoshiki the W instead of Jura. This is why I believe that this plan is viable. But the only main problem that there could be is the fact that Momoshiki knows everything about Boruto. He knows what he says, and Momoshiki has access to everything that Boruto does. The same way that Momoshiki knew Amado's name, it was simply due to the fact that he is conscious and he is aware of everything taking place. Momoshiki quotes different things that happens between Boruto and Jura during that fight, which means that he has the option of looking and reviewing everything that is taking place. So if there is some sort of a plan between him and Kawaki, where Boruto will ultimately betray Momoshiki without him knowing, it really wouldn't make too much sense, as Momoshiki has access to all that knowledge. This is where the idea of a code takes place, and looking at everything that Boruto has told Kawaki in a way that may look like as a code warning us about what is taking place is ultimately going to reveal what Boruto is trying to do. Boruto told Kawaki that if he ever is to lose control again, that he should simply kill him, and that is a viable plan that Boruto will simply accept, just like he accepted it when he fought versus Kawaki in chapter 66. This is the basic code that we have been given, where the ultimate path that Boruto has planned for himself is that when he eventually ends up defeating Jura, Momoshiki will take control, and in that moment it will be Kawaki's job to end up killing Boruto, where most likely quickly after the fact that Jura has been pronounced dead and the Senju have been taken control of, due to the simple fact that Kawaki definitely has the power at this point, especially after the fact that he got his limiters removed, and he will probably get even more upgrades, so he is capable of fighting alongside Boruto / Momoshiki to defeat Jura. He's clearly going to be capable of dealing with code. So that's not something too big of an issue, or at least at our current level of understanding. What's going to be the pressing issue is defeating Momoshiki, and that's where Kawaki at the end of that fight his task has been made clear, where after Jura's death takes place, we will see Momoshiki versus Kawaki take place. Whether Boruto could do anything to restrain Momoshiki or not, that's something that Kawaki will ultimately have to determine for himself. But as Kawaki does want to kill Momoshiki and later on himself to get rid of this Otsutsuki threat, it makes quite a bit of sense for that to be the plan, and for that to have been the code that Boruto ended up giving Kawaki to let him know when exactly he needs to be taken out. However, one thing that we do clearly know is that Boruto is still alive in the time skip, and he ultimately ends up fighting Kawaki. This means that Boruto in that instance, he is not accepting the fact of dying, and this can tell us a few things. Either he has ended up working with Momoshiki to create this better future, their goals end up aligning. I seriously doubt that being the case, but it is a potential option. Or the second, this plan didn't end up working, where we ultimately had Momoshiki who ended up escaping from the grasp of Kawaki, and the plan of Boruto to ultimately betray Momoshiki ended up failing. In my personal view, I believe that there will be a period of time where Momoshiki takes control of Boruto's body almost in a permanent way, like we have seen him explain and say that is in the future for Boruto. That is something I can deem to be possible. But then later on, throughout multiple series of events, we see Boruto who ends up gaining control of his body, where he ends up stating to Kawaki again that he is in fact still a shinobi. Because when Boruto and Kawaki fight, we do end up seeing that Kawaki is a bit surprised and caught off guard by some of the abilities that Boruto possesses, and that is seriously when Boruto ends up using his Jogan. So to me, there is a bit of a time lapse between Boruto / Momoshiki and Kawaki defeating Jura, and then the fight between Kawaki and Boruto taking place, which would give more credence to Kawaki being kinda surprised at the abilities that Boruto ends up showing. And to understand exactly why this plan could go wrong, you have to watch this video right here, as I describe exactly what lies in Boruto and Momoshiki's fate.